Welcome back to the Late Firestarter channel. I'm the Late Firestarter. Real quick, give me an F, give me an I. That spells financial independence, which means freedom. You quit your job, do whatever you want, or get another job. It doesn't really matter. You're independent financially. Wouldn't that be great? And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get on my journey to financial independence, but it's more of a marathon than a sprint. But most people have a longer marathon, because if you're 20 years old and you want to retire at 40, you got 20 years. But what if you're 45 and you want to retire at 55? You got 10 years. So boom, it's cut in half. So maybe it's a half marathon for this guy, Late Firestarter. And the RE part of FIRE is retire early. You know, because you're trying to retire before 65 or 67 and a half or whatever it is these days. So, you know, you want to retire early if you can. That's the whole goal. And so I'm really doing this through rental income and dividend investing. And this channel is really about my journey, as well as just giving some different advice on this whole FIRE idea. Now, finances is something I love. It's something I find interesting. And really what I love more than money, more than finances, is helping people. I just love helping people. I love answering questions. I'm a teacher at heart. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe, follow along. But what I would love is comments below. Any questions you have, any things you want me to look into for you or share with you or do for you in these videos, I'd love to do, because I just love that stuff. Today, what I want to speak to you about, though, is emergency funds. Whenever people get into finances, the financial gurus, the guys who are making millions off teaching you how to get out of debt, right? Answer that dichotomy. That's just dissonant in the max, isn't it? It's like, hey, you are desperately in need of financial help. You are over your head in debt. Give me some money so I can help you get out of debt. What? Anyways, so these guys, they say emergency funds are the first thing you do. What's an emergency fund? An emergency fund is setting aside money, cash, liquid cash that you have available in case something goes wrong, that you're able to handle that emergency. Some people say pay off debt, number one, then get the emergency fund, number two. Some people say emergency fund, number one, then pay off debt, number two. Some people do a hybrid, emergency fund, pay off debt simultaneously. There's a lot of different things. But this guy is going to say, forget the emergency fund. Emergency fund is no bueno. I'll explain why I think the emergency fund is a bad idea. Always. It is never a good idea to have an emergency fund, in my opinion. But it's not just an opinion, it's based on math, right? So, what am I talking about? Let's just look at it. Let's say you have debt. You have credit card debt. You have $10,000 in credit card debt. And you're like, oh, I want to become financial independent. I want to become free. And so I need to pay off my debt, but I need to save up that emergency fund. So what you do is you have this $10,000 debt and you come up with $3,000 cash for an emergency fund. Here's the problem. That $3,000 is making no money, right? What do I mean by that? That $3,000 is sitting in a bank account making 0% interest, or maybe 0.1% interest, whatever. We are getting nothing in interest, but it's actually losing money because of inflation. So a year later, that $3,000 can maybe buy 2% less than it can right now. In other words, the value is losing value. The dollar is losing value at a rate very small and tiny, but that rate of loss of value is greater than that low interest rate in the bank. So that emergency money is sitting there losing. At the same time, your credit card debt is being interest building. It's just building up that interest. It's just choking you with that interest, right? It's like 18%, 28%, it's just crazy what they charge. And so you have $10,000 that is getting charged 18% to sit here. You have emergency fund that is basically losing 1.9%. So both sides are losing. I don't like losing. I don't like this at all. So in other words, You take your savings account and you pay off your credit card. And usually when I tell people this, I've tried to tell my mom this for years. She had a savings account that had more than enough money to pay off her credit cards. And her response is, well, what if an emergency happens? And my thought, and I would look at her and I'd say, Mom, you have a credit card. What I mean by that is, if you have a credit card that you can spend $10,000 on and you need $3,000 for an emergency, well, if you take $3,000 and pay that down to $7,000 and something happens that day, you're back to where you started. So if on day one of having 10 and 3, a $3,000 emergency comes, you pay your 3 and you still have your 10. However, if on day one you take the 3, pay the 10 to 7, then a $3,000 emergency comes and you go back to 10, you have the 10 and 0, just like you had as if you just paid the emergency fund. So that is the worst case scenario. However, next worst case scenario, you take the 3,000, you pay the 10 down to 7. So now you've got 7 and 0. Then what happens is an emergency comes a month later. You go back up to 10 or 9, whatever you've done, it doesn't really matter, and you're still at 0, but you've actually saved money. Let's look at the numbers. Where's my sheet here? Okay, let's look at the numbers. If you have $10,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest, which is actually pretty reasonable for a credit card, 18% interest, and you were able to pay off that credit card $500 a month. You took $500 of your paycheck and you were paying down your debt, because that's what you're doing. You're getting free. You're getting financial independence. So you're taking $500 a month, you're putting it towards your credit card debt of $10,000 at 18% interest. That would take you 24 months to pay off your credit card. So that's 2 years of $500 a month to pay off your credit card. If you do the math, you realize 500 times 24 is more than 10,000. How much more? It is actually $1,978.27 more that you would be paying. So that is your interest amount that you would pay over 2 years. So you'd be paying $1,978 and change. So you'd be losing almost $2,000 if you had a $10,000 at 18%. If you took that $3,000 emergency fund on day one and paid that credit card, and it drops to $7,000, still 18%, still $500 a month, okay? Nothing changes. You're still paying $500 a month. Your interest rate is still 18%. The only difference is you took your emergency savings and put it towards your credit card. So instead of paying $10,000, now you're paying $7,000. So instead of taking 2 years, it takes 16 months. It takes 1 year and 4 months instead of 2 years. So you just saved 8 months of paying $500 a month. Think about that. If you continue to pay the $500 a month for the next 8 years, your emergency fund would be $4,000 instead of $3,000. So think about that. The amount of interest you would pay over those 16 months would be $916.71. So you would save over $1,000 in interest if you took the $3,000 and put it towards your credit card. Plus, you would have $4,000 in an emergency account in the same amount of time that you'd be paying off that $10,000. So as you can see, that there's ample reason to not have an emergency fund and to pay down that credit card. Let's just real quick look at if it was 28%, because you know what? A lot of credit cards are 28%. At 28%, the $10,000 would take 28 months, so 4 extra months at $500 a month. But here's the kicker. The interest you would pay over that 2 years plus would be $3,627.83. If that 28% interest credit card, you took your $3,000 emergency fund and paid down to $7,000 at 28%, $500 a month, same deal, you would take 18 months. So instead of 16, it would just be 2 more. So still under 2 years' time. And the total interest you would pay is $1,574.54, which is less than half. You're saving over $1,500 just by putting the $3,000 in there. And not only that, you're saving almost a year's worth of $500 a month. So the amount of money you are saving both by not paying off the credit card and using that toward your savings, as well as an interest far outweighs the $3,000 you put into the credit card. The question then I get is, well, what happens if there's an emergency? I say that's what the credit card is for. You have a credit card with $10,000, you're paying it down. If at any time there is an emergency, instead of just using this money that's losing, you put it back on your credit card. Yeah, it sucks, but it's the same difference because you're using your emergency fund and you have zero there. Or you pay off your credit card and then you use your credit card as the emergency fund and you still have zero in your emergency fund. It's the same difference. The only thing is, if you don't have an emergency, you win. If it takes a while to have an emergency, you win. If you have an emergency day one, it's the same. You tie. You never lose. If you have an emergency fund, you always lose. If you don't have an emergency fund, you never lose. The worst you can do is tie. Okay, last scenario, and I'll wrap this up. If you have no credit card debt, do you have an emergency fund? I say no. You still don't have an emergency fund because an emergency fund is still losing money. You take that money and you invest it. Well, investments can lose, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. But the idea is you invest it or you put it in a high interest savings account somewhere. You buy bonds. Be as safe as you want to be. But the idea is do not have it sitting in a checking account somewhere or an interest-bearing savings account of, 0.05%. Either way, it's a losing proposition. And people say, yeah, but sometimes you need liquid cash right now. To which I say, you never need liquid cash right now. Why? Because you have a credit card. Okay, if you have this money in investments and you're making money, you have it in dividend investments, which is what I do, and so you're making dividends, and all of a sudden an emergency comes and you don't have access to money, you gotta sell. Right? It's after hours. It's 9 p.m. at night. It's a Saturday, and you cannot get that money. Right? You cannot sell your stock. You cannot get it. Even if you sell your stock, it takes a couple days for the funds to settle before you can transfer it to your bank account. And so you go, I just don't have immediate access. Okay, put it on your credit card. Why? When you put something on your credit card, it doesn't immediately start charging you interest. You have 30 days of free money on a credit card before you have to start paying interest. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It's all about the dates. But the idea is the second you put something on your credit card, you have time. You have time to pay that off before interest accrues. So you put that emergency on your credit card and then you go sell whatever you need to sell, wait the 2 days, transfer that money, and then pay off your credit card. Then you start paying it back and go back to the investment again. Either way, that credit card is for emergencies. And you never need liquid cash now. You never need to have money sitting in an emergency fund when you're paying down debt. It just is a losing proposition. And so I tell all the financial gurus who are making a ton of money, this guy who's making no money off of this stuff should tell you, quit giving out that advice. Emergency funds are for the birds. If you have a high stress level and anxiety, and not having that money sitting there stresses you out, and you cannot mentally transition into saying, I do have an emergency fund, it's just in the form of a credit card, then you know what? Some things are more important than money, which is including your peace of mind. So if you have to do it, do it. It's fine. We do things that lose money all the time for our own happiness or peace of mind. But when it comes down to just the numbers, emergency funds never win. I'm the Late Fire Starter. I have another channel called The Cheap Guy. I'll put the link below. Go check me out. It's this guy, The Cheap Guy. That's about saving you money. This channel, once again, is about fire journey, how to get to financial independence. It's a lot about dividend income, investments, and rental income investments. I really appreciate you following along. Once again, if you haven't yet, subscribe to follow along my journey. Comment below, share your journey, or ask any questions you have. I'd love to hear from you. And have a happy new year. Late Fire Starter